Alexa, play Imagine Dragons.
Okay.
With Amazon Music, a voice is all you need. Get access to over 50 million songs. Download the Amazon Music app today.
Welcome to On Trial, starring Mark Radulich. Also starring Sean Comer. Hope you're ready, Hollywood, because you're on trial.
All rise. The Honorable Judge Fudge has entered the courtroom. Court is now in session. This is On Trial, brought to you by the Radulich and Broadcasting Network. And tonight I am your defense attorney, Mr. Mark Radulich, at least for as long as my voice is willing to hold out at the rate that it's going. Tonight on the docket, because it's Robin Hood week, is a much better iteration of the Robin Hood tale than the one that's currently in theaters. And more about that, just check out our damn 2 hours spent talking about that stupid Robin Hood movie, where it should have been 2 minutes. But I digress. Tonight we will be looking at Kevin Costner's Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, because everything he does it for you. And currently doing a spit take is your prosecuting attorney, Mr. Sean Comer. How do you do, sir?
I'm Sean, you're not, and Mark, you seriously were saving that up from the time you knew we were doing this movie, weren't you?
I'll tell you the truth.
Don't you lie.
That just came to me.
But just now.
Yeah.
Just now. You've known about this movie how long, and you waited until the last moment to come up with the Bryan Adams joke.
Yep.
And I thought I was the disorganized one.
All right. So you all know how this game is played. Sean gives us some notes. I do a terrible synopsis, and then we jump into our opening arguments. So here we go, Sean. Tell us about Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
Well, there are precious few notes about it. Right off the top, I'll tell you, it really, for its time, has a pretty spectacular cast. You have Kevin Costner in the titular role as Robin Hood, Morgan Freeman as his life-indebted Middle Eastern companion Azim, Christian Slater as Will Scarlet, Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio as Marion, and, of course, the late, indescribably great Alan Rickman in one of his career-defining roles as the Sheriff of Nottingham. It's a product of that time in the early 90s when grandiose set-piece period epics often still ruled the box office. And this one was no different. On a budget of, let me peek at my notes here, $48 million budget, grossed $390.5 million worldwide, making it 1991's second highest grossing film. Along the way, Rickman received the BAFTA Best Actor in a Supporting Role Award for his portrayal of the Sheriff of Nottingham. All things considered, though, even if you've never seen the movie, you are probably well and truly familiar with its most famous achievement, and that is the sickly sweet adult contemporary Bryan Adams ballad, Everything I Do It For You, which was nominated for an Oscar for Best Original Song and won the Grammy for Best Song Written specifically for a motion picture or television series. Other than that, really about the only thing to note is that it took some doing to even get Rickman on board. He turned down the role twice, and what finally convinced him was when the filmmakers offered him total free reign, carte blanche, to interpret the Sheriff of Nottingham however he wanted. And when you tell Alan Rickman you're playing the bad guy and we're just going to leave it up to your judgment, you are going to get your money's worth. Without fail, always. Filmed almost entirely on location in Europe, so a lot of the, particularly in the United Kingdom and France, so you're getting a great deal of authenticity. And last but not least, this is the Robin Hood movie on which the glorious parody Robin Hood Men in Tights was, on which it was pretty much entirely based, just almost all the way through from top to bottom. But yeah, that's for a movie that has kind of been a little bit of a quiet cult favorite. There's really not a whole lot of interesting history behind it. Except that, you know what, I did miss something in my notes here. It does bear noting the reason why we're talking about this, and that is that despite all the mild praise I just heaped upon it, this holds an underwhelming 51% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. On Metacritic, its weighted average is 51 out of 100 based on 25 critics, so it's mostly mixed or average reviews. It was nominated for 2 Razzie Awards that year. Kevin Costner for Worst Actor for his performance as Robin Hood, and Christian Slater nominated as Worst Supporting Actor. In fact, actually, Christian was nominated for Worst Supporting Actor for that and his role in Mobsters, but he lost out to Dan Aykroyd for Nothing But Trouble. And yeah, that's about. Oh, and no shame in this movie coming in second in 1991 because the first place movie, Terminator 2: Judgment Day.
Should be noted that this shot for a budget of $48 million made almost $400 million. I mean, it was a good, bad, or indifferent, liked or hated. It was a smash success.
Yeah, again, it was largely because there hadn't quite been the kind of full-on cynical backlash to these massive sweeping epics at this point. Kind of like there often is now toward superhero movies and big special effect extravaganzas. In fact, I believe this was only a year or two removed either way from Dances with Wolves winning Best Picture. It was either a year before or a year after. I forget which. But yeah, long story short, we will not be discussing this one for 2 hours. There just isn't 2 hours worth of things to say.
No, for that, you'll have to go back to Damn You Hollywood. I still can't believe we went 2 hours on
You
that
talked
show.
for 2 hours about a shitty Robin Hood movie?
We couldn't stop complaining about it. It went on
This
forever.
one isn't even that bad.
No. All right. So, as with many of the Robin Hood stories, our story begins with our titular hero in the Crusades, the Third Crusade, because everyone loves a sequel. He's out there with Richard the Lionheart, King of England. They are away, and while they are away, the Sheriff of Nottingham, who is Alan Rickman, is seeking to claim lands and the rule of England. Robin Hood comes back. Along the way, he makes a friend of Azim, who is played by Morgan Freeman, who does the Chewbacca life tet thing. So they're sort of attached at the hip. Robin comes back to find that his father is dead, His lands are in ruins, and he has no home to come home to. He finds out the Sheriff of Nottingham has driven people into Sherwood Forest, and he is taxing people into ruin. Eventually, over the course of time, Robin Hood takes up the cause of the poor. He fights back. He starts robbing the Sheriff of Nottingham and returning the gold to the people. This, of course, makes him public enemy number one. This eventually leads to the Sheriff of Nottingham capturing some of what would be known as Robin Hood's merry men, who are set for hanging. Robin Hood, along with the rest of the outlaws, go and save them on the day that the Sheriff of Nottingham is to be married to Maid Marian. Robin Hood saves the day, saves the gal, saves people from being hung. The Sheriff of Nottingham is killed, as are his cohorts, including the witch Mortiana, who I believe is also his mother. And Robin Hood and Maid Marian are then married, but not before King Richard the Lionheart returns home from the crusade and gives her away. Or in Robin Hood Men in Tights, gives her a big kiss and they say, "It's good to be the king." However you like. So that's the 10-cent plot synopsis. I turn it over to the prosecution.
Folks, there ain't nothing merry about the men or anything else in this movie. Not really a goddamn thing. The fact is, many of the reviews described it as depressing or joyless, murky, violent, and that's, in my opinion, just about the worst thing that any Robin Hood movie can be. Not violence. No objection to that, because it's high swashbuckling adventure. But having read the original tale of Robin Hood, when you read it, you aren't picturing a gent with all the charisma of a half-assed stucco job, which is what we got from Kevin Costner. Just a bored here to collect what at the time for him was another gargantuan paycheck. And God almighty, oodle-lolly, does it show in just about every line that he just kind of half mumbles his way through. It's such a departure from the other more engaging portrayals of this character that we've seen, from dashing, charming Errol Flynn, the wit of Cary Elwes in Men in Tights, which again is more joyful and more fun and more memorable than the movie it's fucking parodying pretty much from top to bottom. I mean, hell, when Mel Brooks made Spaceballs, he at least took an unforgettable sci-fi epic, a genre redefining classic, and put his own spin on it and produced something that was just as beloved. In this case, this Mel Brooks was tasked with, please make Robin Hood fun again. Hell, the goddamn fox from the Disney movie. What was a more satisfying apropos Robin Hood than Kevin fucking Costner? I was telling Mark before we went on the air, I said the more Kevin Costner movies I watch, which don't center on baseball, the more I agree with the Family Guy joke in which Chris Griffin walks out of having just seen No Way Out and just blurts out, how does Kevin Costner keep getting work? One day, we're going to have to all explain to our children and grandchildren why this man was one of the highest grossing, one of the most bankable stars of his generation. But anyway, enough with flogging that dead horse. Because that's really only part of the problem. There's just nothing else other than it being a masterclass in cinematography and having a breathtaking score that stands out as especially memorable. You have some of this time's really most respectable actors, and yet they are all phoning it in so very hard. Morgan Freeman is Morgan Freeman, even when he's phoning it in, you're so glad to see him there. Mike McShane is one of his generation's most energetic and just warm and magnetic character actors. He's a delightful Friar Tuck. But yeah, Christian Slater just couldn't be arsed, I think, for much less effort than he puts in as Will Scarlet. Alan Rickman is, as is to be expected. He's detestable, he's loathsome, he's snarling. He's everything you could want from a villainous Rickman performance. Everybody else, though, it just feels like it's either, other than for the most part, McShane and Rickman especially, it feels like everybody else is either having considerable talent wasted on this just bland, dark, mopey effort, or that they just don't have much to contribute in the first place. And that's unfortunate, because this should be such an easy story to adapt. It's Robin Hood. It's an utter classic. It is, our archetype for someone who stands up to the oppressive wealthy just so they can give back to the downtrodden, oppressed poor. It's somebody who we expect to kind of take a certain unrepentant glee in what they're doing, in taking the upper class down a peg. And here it's just reduced to something that feels like it has the skeleton of kind of a fun period piece, but like it damn sure shouldn't be a Robin Hood movie. So there's just very little to say except that this is a movie that is so boring as a whole that if it hadn't been made at a time when people just kind of ate this kind of thing up with a spoon, I don't even think we'd be talking about it today in the context that we are. Giving it a 50% rating on Rotten Tomatoes would probably be considered mostly generous. And with that, I hand the case over to the defense.
So, there's a lot to be said here about poor Kevin Costner, and to which I say, leave Kevin Costner alone. What many are calling a boring performance, a lackluster performance, a phoning it in performance, Kevin Costner is delivering a masterclass in making the hero relatable. Okay? By not overemphasizing any specific trait, like being, British. He becomes the everyman. He's the patriot. Take a drink, everybody. That was a wrestling reference. A really dated one, but a wrestling reference.
Here's to you, Del Wilkes.
Exactly. Del Wilkes donned the mask, and everyone knew that he was Del Wilkes when people knew who Del Wilkes was. But
wait, hang on. I just have to ask, as a point of clarification, did you intend to transition directly from talking about Robin Hood to talking about Del Wilkes, or was this just a spur of the moment thing? Because if it's spur of the moment, I'm fucking impressed. Holy shit! I feel like I should pour a shot of Jameson and down it for that one.
I honestly was sitting here like, how the hell am I going to come up with a defense of this? Oh, I know, Del Wilkes.
And you're doing this when you're not feeling... God damn, dude. I applaud you.
Thank you. All right, moving on. So Del Wilkes, right? Del Wilkes donned a mask so that even though you knew who he was portraying an entity that was the everyman. Anyone could be the American patriot. Kevin Costner isn't giving a bland performance, per se. He's giving an everyman performance. This is a superhero tale where any young boy or girl could see themselves as Kevin Costner because he's completely devoid of any overwhelming characteristic. He's a guy wearing an outfit with a bow and arrow, delivering lines. And you can put yourself there in that position and imagine yourself to be the hero of this epic tale. That's the beauty of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, is that it delivers unto the viewer a hero that anyone can step into that place and imagine themselves there in Sherwood Forest. It is interactive in its own way. As far as the rest of the movie, I mean, you have to give credit where credit is earned. Credit is deserved. Alan Rickman delivers one of the single greatest performances as a villain in cinematic history. I've talked about people, swinging dicks on the set and all of that. We don't need to revisit that particular line of logic again. But to say that Alan Rickman isn't humping the scenery left and right is an understatement. Here is a man who just threw himself into this part. He's overly engaging. You almost like you want to root against him because he's your villain and he's doing dastardly things. But there's a small part of you, it's that part of you that kind of that I'm going to make another reference here. Kind of winks and nods at the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, or Mr. Perfect. Because they're so good at being bad. Mm-hmm. They have to lose. Mr. Perfect has to be pinned by Bret Hart. Ted DiBiase has to be pinned by Randy Macho Man Savage. But there's a small part of you that wants to see him win. Because they're so good. So good at being bad. Alan Rickman is the antithesis of Kevin Costner in this movie, where Kevin Costner is an empty shell waiting for the viewer to step into his boots and fire those arrows. Alan Rickman, it absorbs all of your attention and makes the movie a grand viewing experience. The movie itself is gorgeous. England tends to be drawn up as a dreary place. I think it's this movie and a few others that have noted, that the weather is just terrible. I think it's actually Morgan Freeman who does make that comment at some point, that it's just a terrible place to be. I want to say maybe it's like a Harry Potter movie or something else where this is a very similar thing about. No, it was Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman about she looks around and she goes, so this is England? She's like, it's terrible. She's like, grows on you after a while. But they went out of their way to take what is often, referred to as a dreary, depressing place, especially in movies, and make it magical looking. Sherwood Forest is a place I'd like to visit. It beams in luscious greens off the screen. Other than Christian Slater, who I will admit is terrible. Go back to yelling about your penis and pump up the volume, sir. Get out of this. You don't need to be in this movie. I can't even give you, well, at least he tried. I'm pretty sure he wasn't trying. But, so outside of Christian Slater, who only plays a minimal part of the movie anyway, everybody else gives above average to outstanding performances. Everyone takes you there. There isn't a performance in the movie where it takes you out of the setting that they work so hard to draw you into. I don't know where you're getting the violent stuff from. This was an action. This was a family-friendly, action, rollicking good time. Even a dour scene like a hanging. You want dour? You want a dour hanging? Go watch.
To be fair, I was quoting what the reviews said about it. I also qualified that by saying, okay, violence-wise, it's not that bad. Violence-wise, it is what it's supposed to be.
Objection sustained. But if you really want dour hanging sequence in a misplaced in a movie it should never have been in, I submit to you the third Pirates of the Caribbean movie. I wouldn't even show that to one of my kids. And that's supposed to be, the Errol Flynn-esque swashbuckling, let's have a good time. They're like killing kids at the beginning of that movie.
Mm-hmm.
This one, they go out of their way to save the kid. And the whole scene, they fire two human beings in a catapult. And it's dealt with in this lighthearted fare. I mean, is it Errol Flynn? No. But I'll grant you, anytime you put somebody in a catapult and shoot them over the wall and somebody says, oh, they made it. That's good for a laugh. That's a fun, good time. Even the doing away with the bishop at the end of the movie. I mean, they throw him a bunch of gold and push him out a window.
Like I said, love Mike McShane.
That's good stuff. The final fight scene, the sword fight between Robin Hood and the Sheriff of Nottingham, I'll put that up against any of the Star Wars lightsaber scenes. That had more depth to it. There was story behind it. It wasn't just them smacking mop handles together like little children. You don't need miles of lavas of river lava, and people jumping onto floating pieces of debris to make a sword fight interesting. You just have to have some sense of buy-in, and there is. There's, he's trying to marry her. Robin Hood's trying to stop it. Neither one of them has any armor. There's a sense of tension in that fight scene that it has especially with a lot of the action movies that are out today, almost a sense of innocence to it. I would submit to you that, it's no Lord of the Rings, but it's up there. In as far as scope, performances, cinematography, dialogue. I watched this again with fresh eyes the other day, and even with Kevin Costner allowing the audience to enter him by not giving a performance. What a masterful actor he is, because who can pull that off? Who can walk on there and purposely not give a performance in a lead role? Only Kevin Costner, ladies and gentlemen. A masterclass in theater. So with all that said, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, I think stands up today in 2018, along with many of our great adventure fantasy epics. And Kevin Costner makes Robin Hood the hero we all can identify with. I'll let the prosecution have the final word.
To go back for a second, you remark about England. I'm reminded of a conversation that I had the other day with my friend Cara, who lives in Scotland. She was talking about how she and her girlfriend would love to one day maybe come to the United States and especially get to at least visit Minnesota for a while. And my being a former resident there of 12 years, I said, and I quote, "Be advised, Minnesota is fucking frigid in winter." Her response, "Mate, I'm Scottish. My country only has 2 months, June and winter.
Nice.
Love you, Kara. But to get back to wrapping up my case, and first and foremost to rebut the defense of Kevin Costner, it was pointed out that he delivers a masterful non-performance as an everyman, and that this is what we look to as one of the most inspiring traits of some of our heroes, some of our myths and legends. And in many cases, that would be true. However, when it comes to Robin Hood, you're not just talking about a hero. You are talking about an archetype. You were talking about a symbol. You were talking about the figure on whom a superhero, Green Arrow, was pretty much based. The avatar of standing up for the poor when the rich have them back into a corner, and they're excuse me, and the wealthy are only getting richer. Robin Hood is more than just a hero. Robin Hood is an ideal. He is a cultural metaphor. I don't really want to see Robin Hood played by a non-actor. Robin Hood should be played in somewhat of a larger-than-life fashion. I think that's why I can appreciate Cary Elwes so much in Men in Tights, is because what he did in that movie to really bring that character to life, and what makes his character so unforgettable, is he basically takes his dread Pirate Roberts and kind of transplants him over to Sherwood Forest. And it works. The charm, the wit, the resourcefulness, the kind of daring do, the sort of cocked eyebrow and the smirk. Again, the only, like I said, the only other quintessential Robin Hoods I can think of that really nail it down more than that are so synonymous, they're the first things I come up with when I think of that character, are the Disney version and Errol Flynn. Costner, if anything, is just forgettable. I guess the nicest thing I can say about what he achieves is, without this movie, there would have been no Men in Tights. So he gave Cary Elwes a very low bar to improve upon. So congratulations for that. Bravo. But and yes, I will give it credit. As an epic goes, as a period piece, gorgeous filmmaking. Absolutely outstanding. But in every other way, that's about all it really is. It's a feast for the eyes and for the ears, but it seems like so much wasted potential. At times, like it's a waste of one of Alan Rickman's definitive performances, and absolutely rightfully so. He is, giving him pretty much the full driver's seat to establish his character might have been the smartest thing that the studio did, because everybody else, arguably with the exception of McShane and maybe, at times even Costner, just feels so stock, so bland, so much so that at times when you look at the Merry Men, you really don't give a shit what's going to happen to most of them, because you're just not given a reason to care. But That's about it. That's about all there is to it. It's a movie that is saved, absolutely carried by Alan Rickman's performance as a villain, and being yet another masterwork of filmcraft that doesn't offer a whole lot else that's actually patently enjoyable.
All right, I believe the jury is about ready to render a verdict here, so we'll move on. True thoughts. I'm sitting here and I'm like, wow, Kevin Costner, like, doesn't even try with the accent.
No. Nope.
Him and Christian Slater was just like, we're Americans, and cotton to no goddamn accent, and they're just like, whatever. We'll work around it. Everybody else is speaking with a British accent, and, then you have these two Yankees. Like, but we'll shoot arrows at them. Like, all right. Well, hopefully people, I like how Kevin Costner decided that instead of a British accent, he would just kind of high-pitch his voice and whisper his lines. That's not an accent, sir. So my goal tonight was to somehow, because honestly, that's the biggest flaw of the film is Kevin Costner, and when you're the lead, that's a pretty huge flaw. I'm like, okay, so much about this movie is great, and I really enjoyed watching it. I bought the extended version, and I watched it. I was putting away laundry, and I was like, wow, I really like this, but God, Kevin Costner's performance is terrible.
And Kevin Costner's general blandness made him ideal to play a serial killer in Mr. Brooks.
So, like, since I watched it over the weekend, I'm like, my job here is to somehow find an argument that makes his terrible performance purposeful and good. So, I'm glad
it is. What we had here. Get the drinks ready, because here comes another wrestling reference. We have Alan Rickman being the Shawn Michaels of this movie, going out there and absolutely busting his ass to make Kevin Costner's Chris Masters look like he belonged on the same set.
I was thinking the SummerSlam match between Shawn Michaels and Hulk Hogan.
I would too, except for the fact that Hogan at his best, Hogan when he actually gave a shit, never quite gets credit for his timing, his ability to actually feel the crowd out, to a lesser extent his psychology. That was Shawn going out there and kind of carrying a former great who just didn't give a rat's ass. Costner, I've come to realize, if he isn't playing like an Arizona farmer or a down-on-his-luck veteran minor league catcher, or as I suggested before, a serial killer, because, well, serial killers want to be bland and unmemorable, don't they?
As I said to you offline, I thought he was perfectly serviceable in Draft Day,
which I've never seen, so I'm going to have to take your word for it on that one. But just about anything else, he's just so exposed when he can't fall back on displaying that certain natural everyman persona. It's whereas someone like, say, Bruce Willis can kind of turn to that as his wheelhouse, as his bread and butter, but he can also stretch a little bit and do something more too.
Bruce Willis brings a lot of energy to his parts.
Energy, yeah, that's a good way to put it. He can go from being a blue collar cop in Die Hard. He can turn around and do comedy. He can play a bewildered, tense, kind of desperate psychologist in the Sixth Sense. He's got more range than probably anybody who ever saw him first on Moonlighting with Sybil Shepherd ever gave him credit for. Costner, on the other hand, he has he has one character he can play, and it's great if it's the right script.
Yeah.
If it isn't, his limitations become just impossible to ignore.
So like I said, other than that, and again, Christian Slater is just terrible. But I mean, there's so much of the movie that I enjoy. I think it deserves more credit than when you say it's 51% on Rotten Tomatoes, you're talking about the critic score, right? Not the audience score.
Yeah, I believe it was the critic score. And while I'm verifying that, guys, I had to really turn up the volume on my criticism because I didn't hate this. I didn't hate this movie. In fact, I was shocked. It was better than I expected. I
appreciate it. I definitely appreciate it now than when it came out in '91. And I was still a kid. I think in 91, I'm still like in high school, and I don't think I was as tolerant as a movie like this.
You were in high school. I was in elementary school and only 2 years removed from having my mind blown by Batman. But watching this again, some performances, Christian Slater can act. He's not a terrible actor in the right role. He has his faults, but he's a damn sight better than this.
But that's the thing, is I feel like he got this role because he's Christian Slater and he was hot at the time.
Largely. Well, it's kind of the same way that the Sean Connery cameo as King Richard the Lionheart feels just tacked on at the end because they needed something. And it was still back when Sean Connery was still Sean fucking Connery, and League of Extraordinary Gentlemen hadn't made him go fuck this noise. But I enjoyed it. It's not one of those that I think would be like yearly appointment viewing, but it's gorgeous. The score was absolutely amazing. Rickman was a treat. I agree with you 100% about that final sword fight. In fact, I'd love to hear our good pal Andrew Graham weigh in on that. He's always got some interesting kind of inside baseball insights on battle scenes like that, especially in period pieces.
Well, next week on the docket, another one for the ages, Rocky IV. I watched that with my son. He's obsessed with it now. That's all he talks about. He also doesn't understand the concept of being unconscious. Every time like Rocky beats Drago, spoilers, and Drago goes down for the count, and immediately I said, "Is he dead?" I showed him tonight was one of those we were off schedule nights. My wife was doing something with my daughter, so I had him home alone. I was trying to make the night kind of special for him because he was feeling left out of things.
Aww.
So we got McDonald's and we hung out at the table, and we didn't have a lot of time, so we were watching videos on my phone. So I showed him Taker versus Mankind, Hell in the Cell, just the spots.
Oh God!
So Mankind goes through the table and he's like, "Is he dead?" I'm like, "No." That's a good question, but no, he's not dead. And we watched the 20 greatest UFC knockouts, and every one of them. Did he die? Is he dead? I'm like, all right, Jonas, enough.
Well, then again, you got to remember the way Mick Foley sold that bump through the table.
Yeah, well,
legit question.
I forgave him for the Mick Foley one, considering you have JR infamously yelling, "My God, they've killed him." But I think I showed him the end of Rocky 3. That's the next one we're going to watch together because he wants to see more Rocky movies now. And I'll tell you what, for a 4-year-old, it's a dicey proposition. Rocky 3 is about the only other acceptable one.
Well, and then may very well come the awkward part when you get to Mick's death scene, and he says, "Oh, Mick's just unconscious, right?"
I re-explain it to him. No, there's a difference.
He's actually dead.
But yeah, And then there's my son's rather macabre cinematic notes. He's like, it would have been better if they just killed Drago at the end. I'm like, Jesus!
Oh my God!
Oh, so
Jonas.
yeah, my son's got a taste for the macabre. But he is loving the Rocky IV soundtrack, which we'll also be reviewing on the Metal Hammer of Doom. He is loving the Rocky franchise so far. So I'm a proud papa. And I will be defending it in earnest next week.
I was reading an article on Uprocks last night that ranked all 8 Rocky movies from worst to best, and I think the author ranked Rocky IV as 3rd best.
Yeah, I can see that.
I would beg to differ, but then again, for the most part, he made solid arguments for each movie. I think the main ones were, I don't feel like he gave Rocky II enough credit, and I liked Rocky Balboa a lot more than he. I think he only ranked Rocky Balboa something like 6 or 7.
I'm assuming Rocky V comes in last.
Well, in fact, that was something he joked about. He said that's the easy thing. That's the easy thing about making this list for any author who ever decides to write it. You can just decide, oh, okay, well, I already know Rocky V is going to be at the bottom, so I can just build on that.
Was he counting Creed?
Yeah, he counted both Creeds in there.
Okay.
I believe he counted the first Creed, and this would make Robert Winfrey absolutely shit himself. Counted the first Creed as, I believe, the second best in the franchise.
Oh, I don't agree with that. Here's the problem, right? You have such a tonal change. I don't want to go into a too long thing here, but when you look at Rocky 1 and 2, these were not just boxing movies. These were character pieces. It was about a guy struggling with who he is, and given the opportunity of a lifetime. And boxing just happens to be the thing in the movie. Then then there's this tonal shift, to Rocky 3 and 4, where there's so much more emphasis on the boxing and not as much on the character. There's more so Rocky 4 than 3. Rocky 4, being a metaphor for the Cold War is hilarious. But that's why, like, when you're dealing with a 4-year-old, you've only got their attention for so long. It was like, okay, Rocky 4 is an easy one. It's 2 fights. It's 2 fights and like 3 montages and some dialogue. This is perfect for a 4-year-old. Rocky 3 has some really dour moments in it, but then I showed him another thing. I showed Jonas tonight was Rocky versus Thunderlips, which he thought was hilarious.
It was.
Yeah, he does. Hogan does something to Rocky, and my son's eyes bugged out of his head. He's like, "Oh, that's awesome!" Which then I immediately I think it was him throwing Rocky out of the ring, and so I immediately then had to show him Bam Bam Bigelow throwing Spike Dudley. This is what happens when your father's a big wrestling fan. So, all right. So yes, next week is Rocky IV on trial. Sean will have the dubious pleasure of having to prosecute this thing, and I will have the genuine honor of defending it because I genuinely love Rocky IV. I'll stand by as one of the best Rocky films. For me, it's 1, 2, 4.
See, longtime fan of the show, Tara, who I talk to all the time. She and I go all the way back to college. This has been a sore spot for her going clear back to when we talked about the Rocky franchise on Long Road to Ruin. She absolutely adores Rocky IV.
Mm-hmm.
Feels like we didn't give it nearly enough credit. We didn't hold it up there as being the pinnacle of the entire franchise. And so she's probably going to hate me just a little bit for the fact that I have to prosecute this. But don't get me wrong, it's fun, but I mean, my favorites in the series, my top 4 of the top half has always been kind of in descending order: Rocky, Creed, Rocky 2, Rocky Balboa.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's Rocky 2, Rocky 4, Rocky Balboa, Rocky 3, and then Rocky 5 is at the end. I'm not counting the Creeds.
See, I can't factor Creed 2 in there because I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, neither have I. I'll see it tomorrow.
When I saw the first one, God, it was way, 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 way better than I expected it to be.
Yes, it was way better than it had any right to be, and it deserved a sequel. But I feel like that's not a Rocky movie. He's just in the movie. It's about the kid. And his struggles.
And Stallone is now once more saying that he's retiring the character.
Yeah. So. All right, go ahead and do your plug, sir.
All right. Well, about the only plugs I've got for you are you can follow me on Twitter at Comer Codex if you would like to leave me any of your love, hate, or respectful disagreements. And in the meantime, most evenings you can catch me playing video games on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Comer Codex. Most recently, we have been playing through Batman Arkham Knight, going through the entire story mode. I've taken a couple nights off because of work and just feeling a tad under the weather, but we will be back tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Central Time. That's our new time on Fridays now that my D&D campaign has been indefinitely shit-canned. And also in the near future, we are probably going to start playing Monster Hunter World since it was gifted to me recently by a good pal. And last but not least, occasionally I will jump on there and decide, you know what? Screw the story-based stuff. I just want to play Dead by Daylight and Overwatch for a while. But yeah, head over to my Twitter to catch updates on all of that. Thank you for following us, for listening, for downloading, for recommending us. By all means, keep that feedback coming, and never forget to never dull your colors for someone else's canvas.
All right, next week is Boxing Week all week long. We're starting with December 1st, Saturday night, Deontay Wilder, versus Tyson Fury. It's a heavyweight boxing match on pay-per-view, Showtime pay-per-view.
Tyson Fury, thank you. I couldn't remember his first name. I was trying to earlier.
Myself, Pat Mullen, probably Gavin Napier will be doing live alternative commentary. Why listen to the bozos at Showtime when you can listen to the bozos on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network? Our commentary, much, much more entertaining. We continue Boxing Week with source material, Superman versus Muhammad Ali. On Tuesday, we will be reviewing myself, Ronnie Adams, and Jason Teasley will be reviewing Creed 2. Robert Winfrey has taken the night off because he has to deal with MMA, and he doesn't want to have to review a boxing movie. That was his words, not mine. The aforementioned Rocky 4 soundtrack on Metal Hammer of Doom, where I will continue to regale you with stories of my son belting Hearts on Fire in the backseat of my car.
Yes!
I am a proud papa. And then we're right back here, our second week in a row for On Trial, Rocky 4. Sean will be prosecuting, I will be defending. The following week, on our last On Trial of the year, will be Jingle All the Way! Where
put the cookie down.
Sean will be defending. I will be prosecuting. So I'm sure that'll be a lot of fun. All right. With that said, court is now out of session. I don't remember these terms. I'm so tired. Be well, be safe, and behave.
Inspiration to help you do insurance stuff.
Okay, time out. You're gonna let your budget be the boss of you? Take control with Progressive's Name Your Price tool. Tell us what you want to pay for car insurance, and we'll help you find options that fit your budget. Here's some music to get you pumped. Da-dong, 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 dang, dang. I hear your budget laughing at you. Oh, wait, that's just those kids laughing at me. Ignore them! Da-dong, da-dong,
Progressive
da-dong.
Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.